Amidst a severe snowstorm in the Karakoram Mountains, a lone mountaineer spots a bright green glow emanating from an ice wall. Wiping the frost away, he uncovers a massive, pulsating sphere of light buried within the glacier. He strikes the frozen surface with his pickaxe, causing a blinding flash that knocks him unconscious. Upon waking in the snow, the man finds the giant sphere vanished and a strange, raised scar etched onto his hand. The story jumps to present-day Princeton University, where astrobiologist Helen leads a laboratory lecture. Later, she returns home to her stepson, Jacob, who remains emotionally withdrawn following his father's death. While preparing dinner, Helen receives an abrupt phone call from a stranger stating that a vehicle is arriving to pick her up. Looking outside, she spots police cruisers surrounding her house. An agent knocks at her front door, insisting she accompany him immediately, without providing any explanation. Refusing to abandon Jacob, Helen is relieved when her neighbor steps out to investigate the commotion, allowing Helen to leave the boy in her care. Helen sits in the back of a dark SUV. The car pulls into an airfield where a large military helicopter waits in the rain. Inside the noisy chopper, Helen sits with other confused scientists, including an astronomer and a civil engineer, who were all abruptly taken from their homes. The helicopter lands, and the group is rushed into the busy halls of Fort Linwood Military Academy in New Jersey. A soldier shouts for everyone to turn over their phones, but Helen quickly hides hers inside her jacket. Her old friend Michael spots her in the crowd, explaining she was brought in because of her past work with Professor Barnhart. Michael leads everyone into a briefing room and stands before a glowing screen showing a NASA projection. He tells the room that an unknown object is moving through space on a strange path at extreme speed. The screen updates to show a direct collision course with Earth. Michael states that a missile strike is impossible because the object is too fast, so this team is gathered to handle the aftermath. The projection reveals the impact site is Manhattan, and a large digital timer counts down the final hour before it hits millions of residents. Helen sneaks into a bathroom stall and calls Jacob on her hidden cell phone. She urgently tells him to wait in the basement, keeping the disaster a secret. When she steps out, a female soldier is waiting. Instead of confiscating the device, the soldier asks to borrow the phone to call her own family. Later, the scientists fly toward the crash zone in a helicopter. They quickly get alarmed after realizing the incoming mass isn't a normal asteroid. Panic increases when the pilot announces their missile launch capabilities have been disabled. With the timer ticking down, the terrified scientists brace for the end and grip each other's hands. The countdown finishes, but the catastrophic impact never happens. Helen peers out the window and watches a glowing sphere slowly descend over the skyline. The object lands in the middle of Central Park, creating a massive cloud of dirt that sends the gathered crowds fleeing in panic. The scientists put on silver protective suits with clear visors and walk cautiously through the misty park. Nearing the massive sphere, they feel a strange static energy and notice their equipment experiencing interference. Soon, heavily armed military troops and police units speed to the scene, pointing their rifles and spotlights at the object. The surface of the sphere swirls with intense light and opens up, revealing a slender, humanoid figure that steps out to face the crowd. Helen walks forward and approaches the creature. The figure reaches out a hand to her, but a nervous soldier suddenly fires his weapon. The alien collapses into Helen's arms. Instantly, a towering, dark, robotic giant marches out of the glowing sphere. Its single red eye flashes, emitting a wave that kills all engines and lights. The giant machine then unleashes a piercing shriek, forcing everyone to the ground in agony. The huge machine steps toward the wounded alien. However, the fallen creature weakly raises his hand toward the robot. The giant's glowing eye goes dark, and it completely freezes in place. Instantly, all the surrounding vehicle headlights flicker back to life. The wounded alien is rushed down a corridor into a medical area. The medics are confused and struggle to treat the unknown being. They cannot find any veins for an IV. As the creature's condition worsens, Helen suggests finding a surgeon to take out the bullet. A surgeon soon arrives and begins operating under local anesthetic. He makes an incision in the strange gray exterior. He is surprised to find pale flesh underneath and removes the bullet. Suddenly, the gray outer tissue starts to crack and pull away from the body underneath. The surgeon carefully peels off the thick organic layer. Everyone watches in shock as a completely human-looking man is revealed beneath the shell. Later, the human-like alien lies unconscious inside a clear, protective capsule. The alien suddenly gasps awake. He looks around in a panic and presses his hand against the clear wall. Helen speaks to him in a calm calm, soothing voice. She introduces herself and assures him that they want to help. The alien slowly calms down, but instead of answering her, he simply repeats her last words. The world reacts with panic to the sphere's arrival. News broadcasts show chaotic trading floors as global stock markets plummet. Massive traffic jams clog highways and bridges as citizens desperately attempt to evacuate major cities, while other large crowds flee on foot. With the president and vice president secured in undisclosed locations, Secretary of Defense Regina Jackson leads an emergency briefing aboard a military aircraft. A soldier informs her that the aliens compromised a defense communications satellite. They used it to hack into the military mainframe, temporarily disabling missile defenses and accessing classified data. Furthermore, smaller spheres are reportedly touching down across the globe. Later, Regina arrives at a secure laboratory to meet the lead researchers. Using an interactive holographic table, a geneticist presents their findings. He explains that the tissue samples contain DNA from 3 separate life forms. The being's actual body is entirely human, while the gray outer skin they removed was a bioengineer protective suit made of placental tissue. The scientists conclude that the extraterrestrials must have visited Earth in the past to harvest human DNA, allowing them to grow this human form for their arrival. The group watches the alien in the medical room as he breathes through an oxygen mask and suddenly asks for water in clear English. A doctor hands him a glass, and his hands shake violently while drinking. He mentions that adapting to this new human body will take time. Regina steps forward to assert her authority as Secretary of Defense, but he seems unbothered. When Helen asks his name, he calls himself Klaatu. He explains he represents a gathering of civilizations and requests to address the nearby assembly of world leaders at the UN. Regina immediately shuts the idea down, demanding he explain his purpose to her instead. When Klaatu remains uncooperative, Regina decides to sedate him and move him to a secure military site for interrogation. Michael strongly protests, arguing that Klaatu should be allowed to speak to the UN, but Regina insists the alien represents a serious threat. As the argument escalates, Helen intervenes, agreeing to administer the drugs herself to prevent someone else from doing it. Inside the medical supply room, an agent hands Helen the classified serum. However, as she turns back to the glass shelves, she discreetly palms a vial of saline solution. Regina tells Klaatu he will be transported to a different facility, but he calmly states he is leaving. Regina refuses, arguing that he invaded their airspace and his machine attacked their troops. Klaatu points out the machine only activates around violence, but Regina ignores this and orders Helen to proceed. Helen steps forward and injects the clear saline into his IV line, leaning in to whisper that he must run. Once Helen is escorted out, Klaatu is strapped to a wheelchair with black wrist restraints and wheeled by agents into a vast, empty room. There, he is hooked up to a polygraph machine. A seated agent asks him control questions while watching the monitor's readings. Klaatu provides brief, literal answers before calmly suggesting the agent let him go. Suddenly, the lie detector goes haywire, violently electrocuting the agent until he slumps over. Klaatu then takes control of the dazed man's mind, compelling him to reveal the exit gate and the path to reach it, before finally ordering him to hand over his suit. Klaatu uses his abilities to tap into the facility's security cameras, pinpointing the guards' positions. He then emits a high-frequency sound that incapacitates them all. While the base falls into a panic, Klaatu calmly strolls past the fallen guards and steps into an elevator to exit the building. During the commotion, Helen hurries through the lab, carefully securing a sample of Klaatu's tissue inside her jacket pocket. In the control room, Regina commands her staff to launch a massive manhunt for the fugitive. Klaatu makes his way to a packed train station, where frustrated travelers crowd the floor due to widespread delays. Feeling hungry, Klaatu places his hand against a vending machine glass, making a sandwich drop for free. A nearby curly-haired boy silently watches him do this. As he eats, Klaatu studies the tense crowd, watching as a loud argument between two impatient men escalates into a physical fight. Soon after, Klaatu walks into the empty men's bathroom. He pulls back his suit jacket to reveal a fresh blood stain on his shirt. He stares at his pale reflection in the mirror for a moment before suddenly collapsing onto the tiled floor. At her house, Helen gets a phone call from a doctor at Newark Penn Station claiming he has her patient. She quickly drives to the busy station and finds Klaatu waiting. They head out to her car, where her stepson Jacob sits in the back. Klaatu greets him, but Jacob looks away silently. Klaatu then asks Helen for the small vial in her pocket. He opens it and rubs the glowing gray substance over his bloody chest, instantly closing the deep cut. Meanwhile, the army launches armed drones to bomb the giant robot. A red light glows on the machine's face as it detects the threat. It shoots a beam to destroy the incoming missiles. The robot then hacks the remaining drones, forcing them to blow up the tanks below. The entire strike force is destroyed in seconds, leaving the military commander staring at his screens in shock. As Helen drives through the rainy night, they pass a massive line of traffic fleeing the area. Watching the cars, Jacob insists that people should stay and fight the aliens. He angrily declares they should kill them, adding that his dad would have done the same. Helen later pulls into a wet McDonald's parking lot. Jacob quickly hops out of the car, announcing he needs to use the bathroom. Left alone in the quiet vehicle, the alien asks Helen about Jacob's father. Helen quietly reveals that he died while serving in the army. When the alien asks about Jacob's biological mother, Helen explains she passed away when he was a baby. Helen had married his father, but after he was killed a year ago, she became the boy's sole guardian. Klaatu sits across from Mr. Wu inside a McDonald's. Mr. Wu is an alien who has lived on Earth for 70 years. He explains that humans are stubborn and refuse to change their destructive behavior. Klaatu agrees and tells him to leave the planet before the cleansing operation begins. However, Mr. Wu gently refuses. He has seen the good in humanity and loves his human family, so he chooses to stay and spend his last moments with them. Meanwhile, military commanders watch camera feeds from a base. Outside, soldiers and construction vehicles erect a massive wall of protective panels around the inactive giant robot, hoping to block its dangerous powers. Back on the road, police cruisers speed past Helen's car with flashing lights. Emergency broadcasts announce that the alien is now a wanted fugitive. Helen drives into a dark wooded area in New Jersey. Klaatu asks her to stop and quietly exits the car. Helen tells Jacob to lock the doors and steps out into the rainy night. She walks alone through the dense trees, trying to follow the alien. Suddenly, a swarm of tiny glowing insects buzzes past her face in the dark. She follows the glowing trail to a small pond, where Klaatu stands silently staring into the water. The water in the lake glows and churns as a luminous sphere rises to the surface. Klaatu touches the orb, triggering a global sequence. Around the world, identical giant spheres ascend from oceans and deserts, creating massive storms. A shaken Helen returns to the car. Jacob notices her unease and questions why they are helping the stranger. He fears Helen might like Klaatu and let him move in, taking his late father's place. When Helen tries to reassure him, Jacob yells that she does not understand and runs into the foggy woods. Helen chases after him. They stop among the trees as a brilliant light shines through the branches, watching the glowing sphere fly away to join the others leaving Earth. At a command center, officials note the only sphere staying behind is the giant one in Central Park. Klaatu emerges from the forest shadows and asks for a ride to the city. Helen refuses to help until he explains his actions. He calmly reveals that humanity's destructive nature is killing the Earth, since planets capable of sustaining life are rare. His mission is to save the Earth by exterminating the human race. A horrified Helen begs him to reconsider, insisting that humans can change. Unmoved, Klaatu explains they have watched humanity for years without seeing any improvement. He tells her the tipping point has been reached, and nothing can be stopped because the eradication process has already begun. A police car slowly approaches them in the dark, foggy woods. The officer confirms Klaatu's identity on his computer, activates his flashing lights, and aims his pistol at him. Helen desperately begs the officer not to shoot. Klaatu calmly states he will not hurt the man, but Jacob points out that Helen was actually talking to the cop. Klaatu then states the pain will only last a moment. He pushes the trunk of Helen's car backward, violently pinning the officer between the two bumpers. Helen screams in horror as the cop collapses. Klaatu walks over, pulls a small vial from his pocket, and rubs a dab of gel onto the officer's forehead. The man suddenly gasps back to life. Helen stares at Klaatu in total confusion, questioning why he would save one man but destroy everyone else. Klaatu explains the cop was merely an obstacle, and he meant no harm. Convinced Klaatu can stop the destruction, Helen offers to drive him to a real human leader to change his mind. At a command center, officials watch video monitors showing the glowing spheres pulling various animals inside. A woman deduces that the spheres are functioning as arcs, warning that a catastrophic flood is imminent. Meanwhile, the towering black bio-robot is secured deep within an underground silo, while violent riots and looting erupt across the globe. Helen then drives Klaatu to the dark, rainy home of Carl, a Nobel-winning scientist. Inside the study, Klaatu examines a chalkboard covered in complex equations, grabs an eraser, and begins correcting the math. Carl walks in and writes alongside him, silently solving the remaining problem together. Observing his intellect, Carl realizes Klaatu is the hunted alien. In another room, Jacob rests on a couch watching television, catching sight of Klaatu's picture alongside a toll-free hotline to report the fugitive. In the dimly lit living room, Carl sits in a chair wearing a thick sweater, discussing survival with the alien. Klaatu stands quietly by the glass doors. He explains that his people face the death of their son, forcing them to adapt. Carl gestures with his hands, arguing that humanity is currently at a similar breaking point and needs a chance to change. Klaatu listens closely, processing the scientist's desperate plea for mankind. Suddenly, Klaatu spots bright helicopter lights outside. The group immediately scrambles to escape. Carl urges her to influence Klaatu with her own actions. Klaatu, Helen, and Jacob sprint out into the dark, rainy forest. As they hurry through the trees, Jacob suddenly breaks away. He stands in a clearing, yelling and waving a small flashlight at the sky. Helen quickly tackles him into the bushes. A terrified Jacob admits he contacted the authorities, claiming his deceased father would have done the same. Helen grabs his arms, sternly reminding him that his father is gone forever. Hearing this harsh truth, the young boy breaks down in tears. Out of nowhere, a soldier drops down on a cable, snatches Helen, and hoists her into the sky. Two remaining helicopters target Klaatu using thermal vision. Before their guns can fire, Klaatu incapacitates the pilots, sending the choppers crashing into a fiery explosion. Terrified by the explosion, Jacob sprints into the dark woods. He scrambles onto a slick, broken bridge and slips, but Klaatu instantly grabs his arm and pulls him to safety. Jacob admits he is lost, and Klaatu calmly guides the frightened boy forward. Elsewhere, armed soldiers escort Helen down a concrete corridor. She intercepts Regina, desperately pleading to be released so she can reason with Klaatu, but Regina sternly rejects her. At a secure military facility, a technician in a silver hazmat suit uses a robotic arm to drill into the giant biorobot's exterior. The diamond drill snaps. When the worker sets the broken piece down, tiny metallic insects crawl from the cracks, rapidly multiplying and consuming the metal. The giant robot suddenly disintegrates into a swirling cloud of bug-like nanobots that instantly devour everything in the chamber. As the aggressive swarm attacks the observation window, a commander announces the base is permanently sealed. The thick glass violently shatters, and the deadly cloud floods the control room, trapping the men inside. And the serious soldier holding a tablet reports to Regina, confirming the swarm survives their attacks and rapidly expands outward. Outside, military tanks and launchers fire heavy missiles directly into the massive black cloud. The explosions do nothing, and the cloud only grows larger. The swirling mass of insect-like machines sweeps across a long highway, completely devouring an 18-wheeler truck and tearing apart the road signs in its path. Regina enters a small room where Helen is waiting. She decides to let Helen go try to speak with him, and Michael volunteers to accompany her. Klaatu walks with Jacob to a small, abandoned shack near a bridge. Inside, Jacob picks up the dusty wall phone and speaks with Helen, confirming their location. Later, while riding in the open bed of a pickup truck in the rain, Jacob looks at Klaatu and says he doesn't want him to be killed. Klaatu stares back at the boy, his expression shifting as he considers this. Klaatu and Jacob are dropped off outside a cemetery. Jacob scales the iron fence and hurries among the headstones to his father's grave. He begs the alien to use his abilities to bring his dad back, but Klaatu calmly explains that he cannot undo this. Devastated by the refusal, Jacob collapses into the grass and weeps. Soon, Helen rushes into the cemetery and drops down to embrace the sobbing boy. As they cry together, she strokes his hair and reassures him that they are not alone. Klaatu observes their heartfelt reunion with deep focus. Approaching Helen, he admits that he can now perceive a positive side to their species. Helen looks up with tear-filled eyes and pleads for a chance to change. Moved by their bond, the alien agrees to help and declares they must return to the city. Meanwhile, a swirling dark cloud of nanobots descends upon a massive stadium, rapidly dissolving the structure into dust. The colossal swarm then sweeps across the landscape, advancing relentlessly toward the New York City skyline. In a command center, Regina speaks to the president over the phone, advising him that military force will only escalate the situation. But the frustrated president commands a military strike instead. Meanwhile, Michael drives Helen, Jacob, and Klaatu into a deserted New York City, heading toward the sphere. Approaching a military barricade, Klaatu pushes Michael's leg down on the gas pedal, forcing the SUV to crash straight through the wooden barriers. Armed soldiers pursue them on foot and in vehicles, but they abruptly stop when command orders them to stand down. The SUV rolls into a gloomy central park. The group looks around, shocked to find that the area surrounding the glowing sphere is completely abandoned. Suddenly, the military bombs the park. A massive explosion erupts, flipping the SUV into the air and sending it crashing onto its roof in a blazing inferno. Inside the wreckage, Michael lies dead, but the others survive the violent impact. The deadly nanobot swarm sweeps over the park and begins eating the overturned vehicle. Klaatu kicks open a door, pulling Jacob and Helen to safety. Seeing the massive, dark swarm blanketing the sphere and filling the sky, Klaatu abandons his path and leads them sprinting into a nearby stone underpass. Under the bridge, Jacob touches his bleeding nose and collapses. Helen panics as her own nose starts bleeding. Klaatu explains the machines are inside them, prompting Helen to desperately beg for help. Klaatu kneels and firmly holds their hands. Dark lumps visibly crawl under their skin, transferring directly into Klaatu's body. Jacob wakes up. Klaatu tells Helen humans can change at the precipice, then stands and gives a final glance. Klaatu forces his way through the violent storm of machines. Struggling against the heavy wind, he reaches the sphere and touches it. A blinding light erupts, banishing his body and causing all the machines to drop dead. As a pulse spreads, military monitors go dark, and city skylines worldwide lose power. Vehicles and industrial machines halt, paying the price for the Earth's survival. The storm clears, and Helen and Jacob walk into the quiet park. Holding hands, they watch the glowing sphere rise and disappear into space. Thanks for watching.